Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna. With me this episode is Executive Art Director Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special Projects Editor Matt Kenny.
Hello, everyone.
And Web Producer Ben Strano. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
And as always, Jeff Rose is here manning the cameras and trying to keep Ben calm. Before we get started, I just want to let folks know that Fine Woodworking Live 2017 is almost at capacity. This must-attend woodworking event is set to take place April 21st to the 23rd at the Southbridge Hotel and Conference Center in Southbridge, Massachusetts. One thing to note, we've added a bonus class. Mike is going to do a quick seminar on photographing your work Friday night after the opening reception, so that's good news.
That's before the beer reception or after?
That's before,
okay.
Thankfully.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
And don't forget to sign up for the Hardwood Derby, a race that's sure to be a blast, and the Hardwood Derby is actually taking place during the cocktail hour, so that will be fun.
Gambling is legal in Massachusetts.
Is it?
I have no idea.
All right. This episode of Shop Talk Live is supported in part by Thumbtack. Thumbtack makes it easy to find and hire skilled local professionals for anything on your list, like cleaners, painters, handymen, and more. Thumbtack customers can find more than 1,100 types of pros in all 50 states. It's easy and free. You just tell them the type of service you're looking for, answer a few questions, and then submit your request for free. Local pros will then put together a custom quote for you. Popular services include home improvement, wedding planning, and personal training, plus many more. It's fast, easy, and did I say it's free? Hire skilled pros today for absolutely anything at thumbtack.com. Okay, let's move on to some happy questions. This first one is from Corey. And Corey says, I have a drum sander and was planning on using it to make bent laminations. What grit should I sand for? What grit should I use for an ideal glue joint? Is it better to leave the surface with a bit of scratch pattern so the glue has something to grip, or do I sand as smooth as I can so the gap is as minuscule as possible? I understand that the differences I'm debating here are microscopic, but I was curious what you all thought. I don't have any thoughts on that one.
Well,
I don't do bent lambs.
I've done quite a bit of this. Mike, you've done some too.
Yeah, I've never used the drum sander for the laminations. You've done that.
I've done it a lot, yeah.
Does it matter, really, the grit?
Yeah.
I don't think the grit really matters. Here's the deal about drum sanders is they're slow.
Yes.
And if you want to go to a fine grit, you will be there for approximately 2/3 of your life as you work your way up through the grits. I would go to maybe 120. That's normally whatever grit is on the drum sander in the shop.
Yes.
That's the one. That's the one I use.
That's the one that's fresh.
Yeah.
Or dull.
And you want it. I mean, kind of rough because actually, the finer grit you go to, the more likely you will get burning, like with cherry, for example. So I always do about 120 when I use the drum sander. And I use the drum sander when I'm going to do a bit lamination that is more delicate. So maybe the drawer fronts for a bow front cabinet.
Yeah.
I would use the drum sander there. But if I were doing something more like a structural furniture part, like a crest rail or a rocker or something like that.
Yep.
I almost think you might just go off the bandsaw. If you get your bandsaw set up well, you cut it, and those cuts are all it's going to be like a bandsaw box, right? They're going to go sort of fit back together the way, sort of. So
yeah, kind of. I mean, the radiuses will change the things a little bit, but I mean, what you're saying is a bandsaw surface, if it's a nice cut, it's probably not that bad.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, if I was doing bent laminations and I wasn't going to run them through the drum sander, I would put a fresh blade on. I would go through the whole setup process again, and with a fresh blade on my bandsaw, I can usually, in a consistent feed rate, I can get a surface that is smooth and straight and flat and everything,
Yep.
and would be fine for gluing back together.
Would you still joint after each bandsaw so at least one face is jointed?
I don't think I would. It would, because if the bandsaw is set up right, and the surface is smooth without any, like when you speed up or slow down, you get those.
Yeah.
That's when you get the really bad striations in the
Right.
cut. So if you can keep a smooth feed rate and you get that nice, consistent, smooth surface, and it's straight, there's no need to go to join it again, really, because you're just going to be gluing it back together. So that's what I would do.
Cool.
And I have done that in the past.
That's it.
On my planer, I found I can get down to pretty close to 1/8 of an inch off my planer. So
Really?
when I did the rocking chair recently, the laminations for the rocker and the little back crest rail, I was able to run those through the planer.
Without
So
any
you were-
kind of a backer.
Joining a face and then resawing it and just running the resawn face through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do have like a 1/2 inch MDF
Like a plate.
base that I stuck in my planer just to, because what happens is really thin stuff would deform down into the little roller recesses. Even if you bring the rollers below the surface, there's still that, and it would sort of mess up. So that MDF I think it took care of it. It gave me a really flat surface and lets me do skinny stuff.
Yeah, my joiner, my planer will get down to about 1/8 of an inch as well.
Oh, cool.
So I once had this conversation with Michael Fortune. In fact, I've had this conversation numerous times with Michael Fortune about planers, because he does a lot of super thin stock through planers.
Right.
And Michael contends, and I think that I think I agree with him on this, that when you send really thin stock through a planer, the reason that it tears it up is because the rollers are too far apart.
Okay.
And so when in between the rollers, it can start to vibrate.
Right,
and,
sure.
And so that's what tears it up. And so Hitachi used to make this planer that he really likes, and then they stopped selling it in the United States, but there was a version of it being sold in Canada at all places, Canadian Tire. And it was like, it's kind of like Canadian Tire is not quite like Harbor Freight. It's more like, it's like Harbor Freight plus Kmart.
Okay.
And they had it up there. I think it was Busy Bee or something like that is the brand name.
Nice.
And you could buy it. I almost had him buy me one time. He was like, "It's on sale. You want me to get it for you?" And
Get a
I
free
was-
pair of socks.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get it back down to the States. But so he contends, because it had the rollers really close together, and he would send stuff through really thin, and it would come out perfect.
Cool.
So if you have that Busy Bee planer.
I remember seeing the Hitachi there when I was there
Yeah.
many years ago,
Yeah.
and he raved about it.
Yeah, Canadian Tire, the flyer comes out like every Wednesday, and it's like national holiday in Canada. Like they all get it, and then they'll go into Tim Hortons and have a coffee and donut and look at Canadian Tire flyer. I'm not making that up. I'm not kidding. It's like a big deal when it comes out.
All right. Well, let's move on to question number 2. This one comes from Mike, and Mike says, I have a complete set of Norton combination Waterstones. Would you recommend storing these submerged in water, or shall I soak for 30 minutes prior to use and then dry for storage? Also, do I need to use the Norton flattening stone, or should I use 220 wet dry sandpaper on glass or granite?
I used to have these stones.
I have them, and I used to keep them submerged all the time, but then the water just gets nasty, just kind of
Yeah.
sitting around. So but before I sharpen, I typically will fill up the tub and put the waters in maybe an hour before. I don't know.
I don't think it takes that long.
I don't think so either, but that's kind of what I've been doing.
Here's what I always did. When you put it underwater, it's going to bubble.
Yeah, when it stops bubbling.
And when
you're
it stops
ready.
bubbling, you're ready. And that's like 10 minutes at the most for the coarse grits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the Nortons, and I always keep them wet somehow. You don't have to submerge them. Only just a portion of the stone needs to be in contact with the water, because then it'll wick up through it. And just to keep it off the sludge off the bottom, I just have a couple little strips of wood to elevate the stones off of that. And I usually just put them on edge in a little Tupperware with just maybe there's kind of soaking in a half inch of water, and that's enough. The 8,000 grit is really pretty non-porous. You don't need to soak that. If you have a combo stone, it's not going to hurt it to soak it. You just don't need to. And as far as flattening goes, don't use the Northern flattening stone.
No.
They're notorious for not being flat, and the whole point is to get flat. So the cheapest way is a 220 wet dry on glass or granite flat surface. That's awesome. It's a little bit messy. If you want to sort of kick it up from there, get a coarse diamond plate, like the coarsest DMT plate, or DMT also makes a dedicated diaflat plate, which is just a really coarse diamond plate, where the abrasives supposedly are designed to stand up to the wear and tear of flattening Waterstones. I have one of those. I've had it for, probably at least 5 or 6 years. It's still going strong. It doesn't, not quite as aggressive as it used to be, but I'm not ready to get rid of it just yet.
Yeah, I've had mine for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like a 400 grit diamond plate is great for flattening Waterstones.
Yeah. I don't know what mine is. I think it might be like a 220 or something.
Yeah, it can be rough. It doesn't need to be fine.
No, and then when you, especially those little scratches show up on the harder, finer stones. When you start to sharpen a plane iron, you'll see these little light scratches where there's little indents in the stone. I've never had that. I don't think that impacts the quality of the honing you're getting at all. I don't worry about that.
No, I don't think it does either. Yeah.
Cool.
The Waterstones that you should not soak are the Shapton stones.
They are
The glass stones or the ones that are
Both.
any Shapton stone?
Yeah, I mean, they're really, really non-porous, so soaking them is not going to help you out anyway because you don't have to. You just want to spritz them with water. But I was also told, actually, Bob Van Dyke from Connecticut Valley was told that you should dry them off immediately after use. Somehow the water on there will, it'll do something. So
Yeah. There's a compound in them called Wicked Witch of the West, and if you get water on it, it will destroy them.
I melted.
It's a very rare element. It's abrasive, though. Funny, my Waterstones also, which are man-made ceramic stones, do not need to be soaked. The coarser grits will soak up water. So as I'm doing it, I have to continually wet it. But the 13,000 grit stone doesn't even soak up water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the first segment. And it's time for our all-time favorite tool of all time for this week. Mike, do you want to step up first?
Yeah, this is really cool. This is kind of a tool. It's kind of a combination of tools and kind of a technique.
Is it blue tape taped to a number 2 pencil?
Almost. Almost. Okay, so I cut tenons. I kind of go back and forth. Most of the time I use a dado blade with a stock laid flat on the tabletop and kind of work it across the dado blade. Why I like cutting tenons that way is it cuts the shoulder at the same time you're doing the cheek. So it's like one and done, you're ready to go. I also like using a tenoning jig because I get a smoother and more accurate cheeks that way. But you always have to deal with then, cutting off most of the waist and then going back to the table saw and cutting the shoulders that way. So it's like, So I get cleaner cuts one way, I get faster tenons the other way. I found sort of the best of both worlds where I have one of those box joint blade sets. It's sort of kind of like a dado blade, except it's just 2 blades with really wide offset teeth, so you can set it up. My set I can set up for 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch wide grooves, mainly for cutting box joints and that kind of stuff. However, I use that thing in conjunction with my tenoning jig. And so it cuts really wide. So it does the same thing as a dado blade now, but the workpiece is oriented vertically with my tenoning jig, and I run it across this box joint blade, and it gives me really clean cheeks and really clean shoulders.
Nice.
Boom.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah.
And where that's really cool is like on the rocker I made, I had to cut tenons on, 2 things. I had to do angled tenons on the little side rails for the seat. And so because of that, I made an angled wedge for my tenoning jig to hold that at the right angle to make a cut. And then to make the opposite cheek, I just put a spacer in to make the second cut. And with the wide blade in there, and it caught both of those shoulders square to the tenon, I didn't have to futz around by trying to angle the blade or angle the workpiece to do the cross-cut shoulders for that. I don't know if that makes sense. But it worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
3 in 1.
3 in 1. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Matt?
You want me to go now? I think one thing you always have trouble with is locating pulls on a drawer front, and because you want to get it, normally you want a pull or a handle centered, right?
Kind of.
Yeah, not always. Sometimes you can maybe put them a little bit higher than center, but on all the little small things that I make, it's good to have them centered. So one of the types of pulls that I make a lot is kind of like a bar pull. It's a stick of wood that is set into 2 little feet.
Yep.
And then I wrap the part between the feet in thread, and it gets glued on to the drawer front. So I always found it annoying to okay, well, how am I going to locate these and do it consistently across all the drawers, etc. And then I started to realize that it's what I do now, and I'm eventually going to get to the tool that I like because of this. So now when I want to center it across the length or the width of the drawer, I take the pull and I move it all the way over to one side and put the little foot flush with the edge of the drawer, and then I measure from the other foot all the way to the other side of the drawer, right? And that tells me how much space is left after you subtract the width of the pull.
Okay.
Cut that in half, and that tells you how much distance goes on either side of the pull.
Got it.
So to get this to work, you need something to what I ended up using. You could use a combination square, right? That works okay. What really works well is the Veritas, I believe it's called Cabinet Maker Square. And it's like a combination square in that it's got this adjustable blade in it, but the blade is like 3 inches, 4 inches wide.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so it has, and it's about 6 inches long, but it's long enough for the stuff that I make that what I can do is, especially this worked really great when I'm doing the vertical centering because it's wide enough that both feet of the pull register on the blade. And so I can set that up and check it back and forth from top to bottom until I've got it dialed in perfectly. Then I set that on there, locate the pull, and hold the pull in place, take the cabinet maker square away, and I just put a piece of tape down. And that tape is just enough of a ledge that once you have the glue on the feet, you can go back and register against that tape again.
Right.
So I just do a piece of tape like that, both for the vertical and horizontal centering. So it's 2 pieces of tape, and it's enough to get it centered. But that cabinet maker square is an absolutely wonderful thing to do that with, and that's my favorite tool.
Do you use green tape or blue?
I normally use blue tape.
So your favorite tool is blue tape.
No, because actually I ran out of narrow blue tape. So what I've been using, which Mike, I think I have to say I like better, is drafting tape. I have several rolls of drafting tape. No, not the white kind that you guys have here, but the more like manila tape. What is that? What do they call that? Not masking tape, but masking tape maybe.
Just a regular masking tape?
Well, no, it's drafting tape, but I'd never seen the type of white drafting tape that you guys have here at the magazine.
Yeah.
All I'd have ever used in my life, from the time I was in high school, is this stuff that's sort of tan colored.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really narrow.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I have. That's what I use. It comes up a little bit easier than blue tape.
Okay.
Yeah, blue tape, you see, people extol the virtues of blue tape. And let me tell you something where blue tape fails always. In the vacuum press. So, because a lot of times you'll get your core and you got your veneer down on the core, and you want to keep all that lined up, right? So you slap some blue tape on there, and then you put it in the vacuum bag, and you leave it in the vacuum bag with all the pressure of the atmosphere on it for an hour or two or whatever. When you take it out, that blue tape is not coming up. It is a son of a gun to get up. It is so sticky and pressed on there from the pressure that sometimes you got to get a card scraper out to get it off.
Huh.
Yeah. So blue tape's not
So
all
it's
perfect.
too
Mike.
good.
It's not perfect.
Sometimes it's too good.
It's too good, too sticky. But drafting tape is never too sticky.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, my all-time favorite tool of all time is a little shop-made doohickey. I think both of you guys, I'm sure, have them benchtop sawhorses.
No, but I do have a shop made doohickey.
Awesome. But they're great for clamping up stuff. But one of the things that for glue ups and for dry fitting, but one of the things that I use it for is as kind of a finishing platform. And I
Yes.
used to drive nails or brads into the top edge and then pull them out, and it kind of ruined them. But now what I do is instead of destroying the sawhorses prematurely, I pre-drill holes, and then I put inverted nails in them. When I'm finishing a panel or something, I'll finish one side, flip it over, and put it on the points of the nails. But when I'm done, I can just zip the nails out of the holes and put them aside. But those things are just so awesome. I think I have 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And like
I have
said,
some.
They're great for mostly glue ups, but I use them for finishing as well.
Yeah, I use them for definitely glue ups, and I have 2 sizes. One is about 18 inches long, give or take. How long? About
Mine are about 24, give or take, maybe 20, 27. They're about as wide as my workbench.
and then I have like a long pair, maybe 42 inches, something like that.
What do you use those for?
Don't remember.
Bigger stuff.
Like tabletops,
Okay.
because I can something where I can span a 30-inch glue up across them.
Yeah. There's a few comments about these. No,
What, the MDF?
well, they are MDF, but that's
see the
fine.
blue tape?
The blue tape is. I have packing tape on mine.
I have packing tape on mine.
Yeah.
The glue tends to pop a little bit better on
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that works a little bit better.
I don't know why. I think I have the blue tape on there just to protect that case piece. I wasn't using it for glue up, but I've never used packing tape on them.
So I just have a question, because this is something that's always kind of bugged me a little bit about, like the inverted nail trick, or they make those little pyramids.
The pointies, yeah, the points.
So there's pointies on them, and then whenever I've taken something off of it, there's little pointies in the.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't I don't use it all the time, but in this case, I used it for the bottom of the case.
Mm-hmm.
Places that won't be seen. Like I won't leave the piece to dry on the finished face. So for the back panel for my cabinet, I did the back surface first, flipped it over, and did the finished face last. So the side that wouldn't be seen had the points in it. So
Yeah. I guess since I moved to, mostly I use shellac, and if I have like a door or something, that I'll just do one side and let it dry, and then flip it over. But
yeah, I mean, I
anyways,
don't
was
use
just
it.
curious.
Don't use it all the time, but I do. The finish I put on is very, very thin anyway, and so I've rarely had any sort of a noticeable dimple anywhere.
Yeah.
I do the strategic lean where you have something on the bench and you can just balance it so like you have as little contact area as possible.
Yes.
Or I always try to pre-finish. So in that case, if you have tenons with no finish, you can always support the tenons on a little piece of scrap or something like that.
And actually, for the cabinet, I just remembered I did not use the pointy things because I was worried about the weight kind of really indenting it.
Yeah.
So in that case, what I did is I finished the bottom, let it dry, and then flipped it over on top of the sawhorses, and then did the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to the next round of questions. This one comes from Gordon, and Gordon says, I recently purchased some Japanese chisels. I also recently purchased a Tormek T8 sharpening system. God bless him.
Yeah.
I find myself reluctant to use the Tormek system to sharpen the Japanese chisels. Am I needlessly concerned?
Oh, he's opening up a whole can of worms here. Mike's going to be so controversial.
No. Tormek Japanese chisel's fine. It's no big deal. Just use it to grind that primary grind and then go to your Waterstones to put the edge on them. Don't try to use a little buffing wheel on the Tormek or anything like that to sharpen anything. unless, I mean, maybe you could touch up like a carving tool or something like that where you don't mind that edge being rounded over a little bit. But for plane irons and chisels and such, it's an awesome tool for establishing the hollow grind. And then from there, whether you do it by hand or use a honing guide with Waterstones or whatever, finish that honing by hand. But Tormek is not going to hurt the Japanese chisel at all. Some people feel that you need to not have a hollow on Japanese tools because there's that layer of softer steel which backs up that really thin layer of hard steel which constitutes the cutting edge. I tend to always have some sort of a slight hollow to the bevels on my chisels, and I've never noticed anything to where that hard steel is chipping or breaking or doing anything weird. So yeah, just get them really sharp and they'll stay really sharp and you'll like them.
I think also part of the answer to this question is, well, did you buy the 5 for $20 Japanese chisels, or did you buy the 1 for $500 Japanese chisel? Because if you bought the super cheap ones, it's like, who cares what you do? They were only $20, You throw them in a tree if you want to. It's not a big deal.
Why do you throw them in a tree?
Well, I mean, at the trunk of a tree. What do you guys? What do you guys do on the weekends? I throw chisels at tree trunks.
I've been finding chisels in the woods.
It's fairly tough to find low quality Japanese chisels. You really have to work to find them, I think. It isn't like you go to Home Depot and there's the Buck Brothers chisels and then a bunch of cheap Japanese chisels. It's just, even the cheapest Japanese chisel is probably going to be able to put a decent edge on it. Mm-hmm. And
Mike, you don't like that answer. But if you did pay $500 for your chisel,
I wouldn't use it.
You wouldn't use it. No, you should make a display case for it and hang it in your house. Yes, put it on display in your house.
You may, however, make the display case with the chisel, but that will be the only time you'll actually use it.
Yes. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Let's take a break. I just wanted to take a minute and let everyone know that our friends at the Highland Woodworker recently released episode number 29. In it, there's a great interview with SAPFM's 2015 Cartouche Award winner, Dr. Jeff Justice, an amazing overview of the work of 19th century chairmaker and freed slave Dick Pointer, plus a visit to our very own Mike Pekovich's shop, where he displays some finer points with fine woodworking.
I think I'm sharpening a scraper, I believe.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I believe so.
Cool. That was Facebook Live.
Oh, look, right there. There it is.
Oh, there it is.
You can check it out at the highlandwoodworker.com, episode number 29. Giddy up. Let's move on to some questions. This one comes from Greg. And Greg says, I love the podcast. I'm a longtime listener and learner, even if my wife makes fun of me. I recently, last week, ordered a Laguna 14BX bandsaw from my shop. I need some help on the blades. What are your blade recommendations to fully utilize this saw? Keep up the great work, guys, and do an event out west in the future.
Wow.
Thanks, Gore.
Depends on what you want to do with the saw, right? I mean, if you're going to be cutting curves, it doesn't really matter. Just get a bandsaw blade. If you're going to resaw, then that's when you want to start talking about different blades. But Tim Rousseau, who did an article on resawing for us, I mean, he doesn't use a fancy blade. It's just your high carbon steel. I think it's a 1/2-inch blade. Usually you want 3 to 4 teeth per inch. Skip tooth, I think. Yeah. That's what Michael Fortune uses, 1/2-inch blade with a skip tooth configuration, 3 to 4 teeth. I use a Highland Woodworker, speaking of Highland Woodworking, the wood slicer for resawing, which I really like a lot. Mike, you just use
1/2-inch all the time. I get a bunch. You should buy, 3 or 4 blades at a time when I order them. And I use them for everything. And 1/2-inch may seem too wide for curves. You can actually cut a fairly tight radius with that. And what I like about the slightly wider blade is that this is a trick I picked up from Michael Fortune. Tom, I know you do this as well. It's when you're making a cut with the bandsaw, instead of sort of centering the cut on your line, I always sort of angle the stock a little bit so the stock is sort of contacting the rear edge of the blade as you're making a cut. And what that does is it creates a little pivot point, and it gives you a lot, even on straight cuts I do that too, but it gives you a lot more control over kind of following your line instead of just having that single point where you're making a cut and then the blade is centered on the kerf as it exits the cut. So I like and the wider the blade, the easier that is to do. So I found using that trick and using it consistently, I can saw really, really accurately now, as a matter of course, and it's mainly because of that. So definitely
that trick is amazing. Yeah.
So one thing that I think he's also asking, so it's a 14-inch bandsaw. You have this bandsaw, right, Tom?
No, I have the 1412.
So if it has 14-inch wheels, so I started thinking, maybe he's really asking, should I get like a high carbon steel blade or like a carbide tip blade or something like that? And one, I kind of question. I don't think a carbide blade will work. A lot of times they say they won't work on bandsaws smaller than say 18 inches, because like the Laguna makes the Resaw King blade.
Yeah, that's what I have.
And that works on your bandsaw?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen one of those in operation before, and when set up properly, it leaves a surface comparable to a high-quality table saw blade.
Yes.
Yeah, it is freaking phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have the Resaw King, and I keep a half-inch blade in the saw most of the time, and I actually have a 1/4-inch blade, which I don't even know if I've used it yet.
Right.
I bought it for thinking I was going to do some crazy curves, but not yet.
Yeah.
But that Resaw King, I use it not only for resawing, but I use it for rip cuts. When I have some boards that are just a little bit make me uncomfortable on the table saw. It's great.
I have a different carbide tip blade for my bandsaw from Linux. And I was really excited when I got the carbide tip blade because I've seen that they can create very smooth surfaces and they stay sharp forever. And I do like it, and I use it when I'm not concerned about grain match.
Because of the width of the kerf.
Yeah, the kerf is...
It's a wider kerf.
It's like a 16th-inch kerf or something as opposed to maybe a 32nd or less for the wood slicer.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for like just a long-term workhorse blade for like general resawing, or even ripping or even joinery, although joinery I would say 10-inch cheeks, but like cutting dovetails, I don't know, but it would be good for that. Any kind of carbide tip blade would be, because they are. It's pretty nice. It's darn nice.
So I think in general, probably what we're saying is start off with a couple half-inch blades and then see what kind of work you do and buy as you need. That might be the best approach.
Yeah. I do think, though, he's asking about, tell me what brands to get. I think that's what he's saying. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, especially when it comes to high carbon blades or high carbon blades.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of brands, I mean, there are so many good brands out there. It's kind of hard to say. It kind of depends on your budget and all that fun stuff. So, where am I? Oh yeah, segment number 2. It's time for our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt?
All right. Are you guys ready for this?
No.
Yeah. Wake up, Ben.
Earlier, they got a tool and a technique.
Yeah.
So we're done here.
I'm done. No. Actually, I was doing this not too long ago, and I thought, this is such a fantastic technique, but hand-cut dovetails. That's my technique for the week. I don't always cut my dovetails by hand, but when I do. No.
I drink Dos Equis.
I drink Dos Equis when I do it, and that's why they look so terrible. Because I'm drunk. We're going to get letters about that. Yeah, I was cutting some hand-cut dovetails recently, and it was relaxing, and it was nice. It was quiet in my shop. That's all. That's all I got.
It is very quiet. I do enjoy hand-cut dovetails.
I mean, I do, I build a fair amount, and I do a lot of stuff that sometimes I come up with newish techniques or applying a technique in a new way. And that's the kind of stuff we often talk about on here. But sometimes, it's just you forget. Sometimes I think I forget how much I enjoy woodworking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I pretty much enjoy all my time in the shop. But there are times when I'm down there and it's just like, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. I got to get this done.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And you sort of lose focus from why you do it. And so I was cutting some dovetails to make actually a prop for the magazine. And I was cutting them by hand. And it was really enjoyable. I'd forgotten, because I hadn't done any serious hand-cut dovetails in a while. And I forgot how enjoyable it is just to sort of slowly cut dovetails. I'm just kidding. It was not too slow.
Make something out of nothing.
What was
It
that?
was nice. I was actually, when I was doing it, I was testing 2 tools for the magazine at the same time, in hand cutting dovetails and making a prop for something else. And so yeah, multitasking for you, Tom.
Cool.
So he really was working at home.
I was working at home. Yes, I was.
How about you, Mr. P?
Gosh, that was such a long,
Master
boring
P.
answer. I forgot. I have to look at my list here. Oh, yeah.
Blue
Okay.
tape.
No. So favorite technique of all time for this week, something I'm sure I've mentioned in the past, well deserved, I might add, and that is the old drawboard pin technique with the old offset holes in the mortise and the tenon. So as you drive the pin in, it pulls everything together. So that's a good thing, and I've used that in the past. The reason I like it right now is because I'm making a little sewing table, and it's kind of funky construction, little arched rails that connect to the top of the legs with a bridle joint. And of course, on my furniture, all the joints parts tend to stick out a little bit. So you have this open bridle joint at the top of the leg, which you have to clamp in 2 directions. Not only that, it's really hard to get any clamping pressure on there because all these joints are sticking out all over the place. You'd have to make a bunch of calls, clamp in 2 directions. It would have been horrendous. So, drawboard pin, and normally on a normal mortise and tenon, you just offset the hole a little bit toward the shoulder on the tenon, and that pulls everything in together. Well, this is really cool because instead of offsetting it in 1 direction, I'm actually offsetting it in 2 directions. So not only is it pulling the joint tight side to side, it's also pulling the tenon down, seated into the slot in the leg all at once. Oh, there it is there.
Oh yeah, please show his Instagram account.
Yeah. What was that?
How many
Pekovich
followers?
Woodworks. And it worked really cool. But that was actually also going to be my smooth move, which we're not doing. And that's because, so you have to offset the hole in the tenon in 2 directions. So I knew in toward the shoulder was right.
Oh no.
So I thought if it's like in toward the shoulder on the tenon, then it must be down toward the slot in the leg. So I did it, all drilled, and I popped it. I said, oh, wow, there's just like a little bit of a gap at the bottom. I wonder why. I must have just not offset it enough or something, because sometimes it happens. You do it by eye. And I kind of went around and I just assumed everything was good. Then I actually decided to remake the base because I found some better wood. And when doing it that time, I did 1 leg and I saw that gap again. I said, something's wrong. Then I went to the original table, and sure enough, there was like a little gap at the bottom of the joint on every single joint. And I was like, I got my offsets wrong. Instead of like in and down, it should have been in and up. And so I had to like plug all of the holes in the tenons, re-drill them, re-offset them, and it worked. So when you offset the hole in the correct direction, it pulls the joint nice and tight. If you don't, you sort of lock in gaps where you don't want them. So yeah, done in the correct fashion. It's a wonderful thing.
I think you're the only person I know well, maybe Matt does it, but you'd discard the whole base because you found a better wood.
Yeah, I've done that.
Well, I mean, that grew out of, this is something that I'm doing for the article. And so I had to back up and get one stunt leg to back up and capture some joinery for photography. So I found this really nice 8/4 board. I cut a leg out of it. The grain was so nice that I said, well, let me go ahead and cut 4 legs while I'm at it. So I did. Then it's like, there's enough stock here where I could get new rails and stretchers out of the same stock so the whole base matches. It's like, once you know that, if you don't do it, if I didn't do it, it would have bugged me the rest of my life. So I just bit the bullet, and now I have 2 table bases.
Yeah, I made my daughter a jewelry cabinet, which was actually, I made this cabinet in order to test out some techniques and design ideas for a larger cabinet, that case piece I intended to make one day.
Yes.
And it's a cherry case, and it has madrone drawer fronts and doors on it. And it's beautiful. The first time I made it, it was walnut and figured redwood. And I forget why I ended up just throwing out the whole thing. Just chucking it. I didn't throw it out. I've actually been burning some of it this winter. I made this thing many, many years ago, and I came across like the doors this winter, and I chucked them in the fireplace or in the wood stove, and I threw out the whole thing. The drawers were made, dovetailed everything. And I forget why, though, but I just got angry with it and threw it and just chucked it all.
Wow.
Started over again.
Wow. Well, it's funny. I look at some of the stuff I've built in the past, and it's like, oh my God, I'd like to burn that too. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
the good news is you can.
You can. I don't know. I feel weird about it because it does.
Maybe
it's an honest interpretation of where I was at when I built it. So
A certain whale on a plaque, maybe?
I love that whale on a plaque. That's heartfelt, man.
Yeah.
That's art.
That's art.
Well, it's funny. You were all kind of going back to basics. I don't think I've ever talked about my finishing technique here, and since I'm in the middle of finishing my long project, I think I'm a little bit. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of traditional. I put my first coat is a shellac seal coat, and I use the seal coat, but I do thin it. And I'm not really super scientific about it. It's probably like 80 shellac to 20
Alcohol?
Alcohol. Yeah, thank you. And I put that on, and usually it's one coat will do it, but I'm working with some gnarly spalted. It's got spalted, it's got tiger, it's a maple door and a drawer front. And it's got all this stuff, and there's a big burl in there. It's like there was a party happening inside the wood. But, it really soaked up the finish inconsistently. It was really splotchy. So
Right.
I actually had to do 2 coats on that. And then I go to wipe on poly, which I also thin.
Okay.
I take that, again, that same sort of recipe, 80 to 20. And it's really good because my shop is kind of cool, and I like to, since I don't get a whole lot of time in this shop, I like the quick drying aspect of both of those finish processes, and so I can usually put on 2 coats a day. As I get to the final coats, I walk away and let it fully cure before I move on. But it's really fun, easy. I like finishing. So, what do you use after your seal coat?
It's I either continue with shellac on small projects, or I'll switch to a waterlocks if I want some amber tone, and sort of like you, if it's a lighter color wood and I don't want to get it too yellowy, I'll use the Minwax wipe on poly because it's pretty clear as far as that goes.
I use the clear gloss.
Cool.
And one of the other reasons I kind of thin it down is because I don't like a high gloss finish, and thinning these wipe on coats kind of lets me build it to the sheen that I want without kind of being super high polished or shiny.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I always go a little shinier than what I like and knock it down with steel wool and wax, because then you're relying on the scratch pattern, the steel wool, to create that sheen for you. And a little bit shinier than what you want. What that means is you probably have the protection that you want. And if you stop right when it looks good, it's probably not quite enough of a film finish there to do what you want to do.
Yeah, and I do the wax finish as well.
Yeah, cool.
And the other tip that I learned, this is a great tip I learned from Mike many years ago about applying wax. I was having a difficult time removing the paste wax that I put on, and it gave me the tip to put a little mineral spirits in there to thin it up a bit. So that's a good tip for folks who are having trouble buffing out the wax coat.
All right. Awesome. Buffing out your wax coat.
Buffing out the wax.
Talking about seal coats and wax coats.
Should be talking about overcoats with the weather. The next question, as we move back to the questions, this one is from Chris. And Chris says, I've started down the Lee Nielsen rabbit hole, and I blame the four of you. However, I have a question about a number 4 smoother. If you were buying your first one, would it have a standard angle frog, or would you opt for a higher angle? That's pretty easy.
Easy. Standard.
Yeah, go standard.
Go high.
I actually...
go low.
I like the idea of a slightly higher frog, so I at some point bought a 50-degree frog for my Lee Nielsen number 4, and it sort of took it away from my everyday tool, which is what it is. I'm going to use that more than anything else, and I tended with the 50-degree. It was like a little bit harder to push, and it just wasn't as
every day.
And I really like that. And also, if you get it sharp, I mean, the difference between, say, a 45 and 50-degree frog, it's pretty tough to really discern unless you're hitting some really crazy wood. And
Quarter-sawn cherry.
And if you are, then I go with my 4.5 with a 55-degree frog and a 10-degree back bevel.
Oh, my gosh.
Bam.
Boom. That's like, what did you say, 55 with a 10-degree back bevel? That's like 65 degrees.
Yes, it is. I bruise the palm of my hand pushing that thing because it's so much force. And I never use that thing unless I have to. So, or...
I have a 50-degree 4.5, and it's perfect for really figured woods.
You know what's awesome for really figured woods?
Blue tape.
Card scraper.
Which is why that's the toughest thing to justify is a dedicated plane with a high angle frog, because it's like, use your number 4 with a 45-degree blade. If it doesn't work, get it sharper. If it's really sharp and it doesn't work, use your card scraper. Yeah.
That's what I had to use on those gnarly spots. And it was really ugly.
That's not buying it.
I like card scrapers, and I know that you use them very effectively. A number 4.5 with a 50-degree frog. The gnarliest quarter-sawn cherry that I've used, which is the stuff I've been going through all these old 12-quarter boards that I picked up, and it's when it's quarter-sawn and it's all figured. It's not just the normal tear out you get from one quarter-sawn cherry. It's figured as well. So nothing worked, but my number 4.5 of that 50-degree frog just makes it comes out beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. So I like it. But I also have a 4 with a standard frog.
Yeah.
Do
you like that?
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all Lee Nielsen. I feel bad at that time. I said I wouldn't buy any more Lee Nielsen chisels. Or I said I only needed like 2 chisels. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the final question. And this one is directed right toward Matt. So Mike and I can kind of sit back and laugh.
All right.
This one is from Fred for Matt. A while back, you picked up a Hitachi super surfacer that needed some tuning.
Oh, that's right.
I did, yes.
I've seen them in a Japanese woodworking video, and they look pretty cool. Have you used yours? I saw a floor-standing Hitachi PF100F auto-return super surfacer and was wondering if it was worth picking up. It's like Back to the Future talk.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you should get it. You should absolutely get it. See, when Mike and Tom think they're having a joke, but I tuned it up last week.
You did not.
And I used it this weekend.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No,
And
he's lying.
It took 1/1000th of an inch thick shavings off a 12-inch wide piece of curly maple. No tear out.
Where's the video?
I use it all the time to store things on.
That's more like it.
Yeah, I have it, but that's not that it's not a good tool. I just am lazy. Or I always have other things I need to do.
That was
that
the
are
thing
more
that
pressing.
former editor
That I got it from. I got it from
Chuck
Chuck Miller, who worked at Fine Home Building, and he bought it from, I want to say, John Kelsey.
I think that sounds right.
Or I got it from John Kelsey, and John Kelsey bought it from Hitachi, I guess, when we tested it. So it has a distinct lineage.
Been in the family for
It's
decades.
been in disuse for a number of
For a
years.
long time. And I think Ben Strano wants it.
I think he does.
I think Ben wants it.
Along with the lion miter trimmer.
Yeah, it's a lion miter trimmer. I would like to tune that thing up one day, but I doubt I'll ever feel the impetus to really do it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things like, this is what happens. You buy something and then you put it in your shop and you kind of forget that it's there.
Yeah.
Even though I walk past it every day, I kind of don't remember that it's there. And it's like, what would I really use it for?
It's like, I need to plane this board. I could either spend 2 weeks tuning up this tool or stick it through my planer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And use a hand plane.
Yes.
Yeah. So
It's a tough choice.
they're really cool. And if it works and it's in good working condition, I say buy it and put it in the living room and just use it in the living room. It'll be awesome
For your Parmesan cheese.
for your Parmesan cheese. If you got a piece of Parmesan cheese big enough to send through a super surfacer, that would be pretty awesome.
Yes,
I don't
that'd be
think
good.
Parmesan comes that big.
Oh, yeah.
Does it?
Big old
Oh,
wheels. Yeah.
big
Well,
wheel.
it'd have to be like a long board of.
Yeah, you'd have to get a big
Cheese.
wheel
It's a
and,
big
and sort
wheel
of
of
get that
cheese.
on your bandsaw and rip off.
That's right. What kind of blade should you resaw cheese with? That's really cutting the cheese.
Do you have to use a sharp blade for cheddar?
I was actually
Extra sharp.
so I made some bread this weekend, some French bread, and so I went out and I bought some camembert and some smoked cheddar.
What's
right?
camembert?
It's like
Camembert.
brie.
Yes.
Brie.
It's a
It's
soft
better.
Oh,
cheese.
it's the
Yeah.
it's the nasty stuff.
It's better than
Gotcha.
brie though. And so I bought some cheese, and my son and I were in the kitchen yesterday, and I was thinking about making the cutting the cheese joke, right? And then I started thinking, okay, well, where does that phrase come from, cutting the cheese? And I thought, if someone offered me some cheese and then they proceeded to cut it, and when they were cutting it, it sounded like someone was doing that, I would not want that cheese. Would you?
I don't think it's from the sound.
I don't.
It was from the smell,
Well,
maybe some
speaking
stinky
of
cheeses.
Camembert, it's like we were
Is it?
traveling through Europe.
What cheeses? Ben knows. Ben knows which cheeses it are. He's shaking his head like, yeah.
That's the cheese part that I don't know.
We were taking
The runny aspect.
All right.
we were taking a train
We're
from
definitely going to get letters and emails about this.
from France to Germany. It was a very nice train, so we thought we'll get lunch for the train. So we picked up a nice baguette and some cheese from the cheese person right there, and it was some camembert cheese, and it turned out to be really smelly cheese. And so we're on this train. We're trying not to be the ignorant, ugly Americans, and it's really hard not to be. As much as you try, you just are.
You were ignorant, ugly, and smelly.
And then we cracked open the cheese on the train, and just people were very polite, but you just got this look over the shoulder. It's like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You know,
Word.
and it's like, come on, kids, eat that as quick as you can, please. And so, yeah, there you go. We were cutting cheese on the train to not good effect.
Sweet. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap it up. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks for our next episode, and please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. Shop Talk Live is dependent on your questions, so make sure to send them in to shoptalk@taunton.com. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, and while you're there, please give us the 5-star rating, and don't forget to leave your comments. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. Finally, keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. Oh, cut the cheese, man.
This is a weird thing
It
to
is a
say.
weird thing.
Cut the cheese.
I think it's the smell.
Yeah, it's definitely not the sound.
It's cutting the cheese.